I grew up with a dad who was a farmer, a rancher, a logger. He did things. And so from an early age, I was working with animals, I was working with soil, I was working with machines, and I was cutting down trees and pulling the logs. It taught me to look for ways to use mechanical advantage in my career as a builder. It has set me apart from a lot of the people I work with, and it has been a huge advantage for trying to do bigger jobs by myself than one guy should ever be able to do by himself. I'm going to show you some examples of some of my favorite ways of using simple machines to get work done. Part of training yourself to see opportunities to use mechanical advantage is to look at what's on the job. For instance, this is a 2x4. 2x4s are everywhere. 2x4s can be a lever, they can be a pry, they can be a wedge, or you can turn them into a jack. This is an example of using 3 pieces of 2x4s and maybe half a dozen nails to provide a jack that will lift and then hold a pretty heavy load in a safe way. Now, there are other ways to do something like this that involve mechanical jacks, things that are made in factories that can show up on your job, like a high lift jack, to lift something quickly, reasonably safely. There are screw jacks, there are hydraulic jacks, there are all manner of applications of simple concepts that can make jacks that will lift heavy loads. Another one of my favorite ways to use mechanical advantage is with a simple lever, a pry bar. My all-time favorite is a Burke bar. I have used Burke bars to do everything from change tires, to tear out cabinets, to lift beams, to moving table saws. I mean, a Burke bar will move equipment. There's almost nothing that you can't make wiggle with the right lever over the right distance. It was Archimedes, right? Give me a long enough lever and a place to put it, a place to stand, and I will move the world. Levers are inescapable and they are irreplaceable, particularly in construction if you want to be a productive hand. So jacks. I've got 3 different types of jacks here, but I just right now want to talk about the high lift. You see these things on the back of Jeeps, right? 4-wheelers, hunters, for getting unstuck. Well, it ought to be on your work truck too, because sometimes you might need to lift something 20 feet in the air. To do that, you slip a 20-foot piece of tubing, rectangular tubing, right over this jack stand, and then the act of raising that, you see this is a lever, right? Its leverage will push the body of the jack up, which will lift that piece of tubing, which maybe is up against a beam way up there. I've used it quite a few times doing that. So a high lift jack does not just lift with the foot, it'll also push whatever you need pushed, horizontally or vertically. Now, obviously there are other kinds of jacks. You got jacks under the hood of your truck to jack it up when you get a flat tire. This is a screw jack, which is really an inclined plane wrapped around an axle. You see that's what that is, that you're twisting an inclined plane. This is a hydraulic jack, not a simple machine, uses Boyle's law, principles of hydraulic action. Nice little Temco toe jack, by the way. This is the tool I used moving the shipping container by myself. Everybody ought to have one of these. So look around for jacks. There's always a jack somewhere, and it's going to save your back and maybe your life. If you're working with wood, this is probably the most underutilized and handy tool that you're going to have in your toolkit, or you should have in your toolkit. Have a bundle of door shims and be ready to cut a big one if you need to drive it under a set of heavy top plates or a beam to get a toe hold for a Burke bar or a wall jack, or wedge a tree over, or split something that just has to be split. Don't overlook or underestimate the utility of a wedge. So continuing to drill down, everybody is familiar with shims for shimming doors, right? They go from maybe 5/16 or 3/8 to nothing in 10 or 12 inches. But don't neglect to be ready to cut a shim, a wedge 3 feet long. Maybe you've got to drive something in between a set of whalers and a wall form that's trying to blow or needs to be pushed over, or a way to create batter between whalers and a wall form. Maybe you've just got to, I don't know. But miner's wedges are used in mining. They're 3.5 inches wide and about that long. You set those things in opposition. Man, what a beautiful lift you can get out of there. Controllable, a tap at a time. Wedges, shims, don't forget about them. If you've been watching the channel any length of time, you know I've got a couple of cranes. I've got a crane, a hoist on my truck. George Smith and I built that years ago. We built one, then we built another. It's electric over hydraulic. It's got an ATV winch. It works so good. As soon as I got the crane on my truck, I stopped going to the chiropractor. I have a little crane in my shop. I wish it was higher, but it's just so perfect. It gives me a way to move and use and deal with heavy things in my shop safely by myself. You can't replace the ability to do something that should ordinarily take 3 guys by yourself. That's getting stuff done. Now, you may not have a crane where you're at or where you're working, or you need to rig something up. Pulleys and ropes and practice. You've got to practice. You've got to understand the mechanical advantage that can be found with a set of shivs. Changing the direction of a single line pulling through a block is a way to multiply your force way beyond anything that you or your friends might believe. The whole bit about understanding knots and 5 or 6 knots that you can use in construction for rigging, those are simple machines. A rope becomes the application of power. So if you don't know about knots, figure it out, practice. If you haven't played with pulleys, buy some little pulleys at the local hardware store and maybe a little clevis or a shackle and some paracord or something, and practice, because the time's going to come when nobody's going to know how to get the truck out of the ditch except you. And you happen to have a snatch block, and you happen to have a piece of strong line in your truck, and you're going to save the day. If you keep your eyes open, you're going to figure out that the people who know how to use mechanical advantage are the people who get the work done. You ought to be one of those people. I mean, as the last example, something as simple as 2 or 3 pieces of pipe thrown on the floor with a piece of plywood or a board over the top. Now, that's not a wheel and an axle, but it's something that'll move a heavy load smoothly and controllably, and maybe your friends didn't think of it. Maybe they spent their childhood playing video games. Maybe they never got out of the house, or maybe they simply don't pay attention. But that's not you. You can learn to pay attention. You can learn to think about mechanical advantage and how you can apply it to the problem that you have to solve right now. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.